On April 2, 2025, the global trade landscape shifted dramatically. President Trump, a staunch advocate for protectionist measures throughout his political career, announced the implementation of sweeping tariffs on a vast array of imported goods. This move, dubbed by the president as Liberation Day for American businesses and workers, sent shockwaves through international markets and left economists scrambling to assess the potential fallout. These new tariffs represent a significant escalation in President Trump's trade policies. They impose a baseline tariff of 10% on all imports entering the United States. This baseline is further amplified by targeted tariffs aimed at specific countries and trading blocs. Nations with which the U.S. has a substantial trade deficit face even steeper levies. The impact of these tariffs is far-reaching, affecting everything from electronics and machinery to clothing and foodstuffs. The administration argues that these measures are crucial to protect American jobs, address unfair trade practices, and revitalize domestic manufacturing. However, critics argue that the tariffs will ultimately harm American consumers and businesses while potentially triggering a global trade war. President Trump's rationale for imposing these tariffs is rooted in his long-held belief that the United States has been taken advantage of in international trade agreements. He argues that decades of globalization have led to the outsourcing of American jobs, hollowed out the nation's industrial base, and left the country vulnerable to unfair competition. The tariffs, according to the president, are a necessary corrective measure. By increasing the cost of imported goods, the administration aims to make American-made products more competitive, thereby encouraging businesses to keep production within the United States. This, in turn, is expected to lead to job creation and a revitalization of the manufacturing sector. Furthermore, the administration argues that the tariffs will pressure trading partners to negotiate more favorable deals with the United States. By leveraging access to the vast American consumer market, the president believes he can secure concessions on trade imbalances, intellectual property rights, and other contentious issues. However, this approach has been met with skepticism from many economists and trade experts, who argue that tariffs are a blunt instrument that often inflict more harm than good. They warn that the tariffs could backfire, leading to higher prices for consumers, retaliation from trading partners, and ultimately, a slowdown in global economic growth. The announcement of Liberation Day tariffs sent immediate tremors through global financial markets. Stock markets around the world plunged, reflecting investor anxiety over the potential for a trade war and its accompanying economic uncertainty. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, a key indicator of U.S. market health, plummeted by over 2.5%, while major indices in Europe and Asia experienced similar declines. The price of gold, often seen as a safe haven asset during times of economic turmoil, surged to record highs as investors sought refuge from the volatility in equity markets. This flight to safety further underscored the level of concern surrounding the potential fallout from the tariffs. The reactions from global leaders and policymakers were equally stark. Key allies of the United States, including Canada, Mexico, and the European Union, expressed deep disappointment and concern over the tariffs, warning of potential retaliatory measures. The World Trade Organization also voiced its apprehension, urging all parties to engage in dialogue and resolve their differences through established trade mechanisms. The swift and negative response from markets and world leaders highlighted the high stakes involved in President Trump's gamble on tariffs. The long-term economic consequences of Liberation Day tariffs remain uncertain, but many economists predict a bleak outlook. They warn that the tariffs could trigger a domino effect of retaliatory measures, leading to a global trade war with devastating consequences for the global economy. One of the most pressing concerns is the potential for a global recession. Economists at JP Chase, a leading global financial institution, have warned that the tariffs, coupled with potential retaliation, could be the catalyst for a worldwide economic downturn. This view is echoed by other prominent economists, who argue that the tariffs will disrupt global supply chains, increase costs for businesses, and dampen consumer spending, ultimately pushing the world into recession. In addition to the risk of recession, economists also predict a surge in inflation. As tariffs drive up the cost of imported goods, businesses will be forced to pass these costs on to consumers in the form of higher prices. This in turn could lead to a decrease in consumer purchasing power, further dampening economic activity. The potential impact on specific sectors and countries is equally concerning. Industries heavily reliant on global supply chains, such as automotive manufacturing and electronics, are particularly vulnerable. Developing countries that depend on exports to the U.S. market are also at risk, as tariffs could severely impact their economic growth and stability. The Liberation Day tariffs represent a high-stakes gamble by the Trump administration, one that has drawn sharp criticism from economists, business leaders, and policymakers worldwide. While the administration argues that the tariffs are necessary to protect American interests, the potential for a global trade war, recession, and widespread economic hardship has cast a long shadow over the global economy.